Welcome to another HoloNet news episode from the Infernal Brotherhood of the Scruffy Looking Nerf Herders. That's right, my name is Adam, and today is December 2nd, 2025, and today's Star Wars news discussion is going to include Star Wars abandoning the Mandalorian role. What? Sean Levy talking about the music for his Star Wars Starfighter. Kathleen Kennedy finally figuring out how to stop ruining Star Wars? ? And then we're going to take a look at the Star Wars news feed as usual. So sit back, grab your cup of coffee or your drink, and let's dive into some news. All right, Star Wars officially abandons Pedro Pascal's original Mandalorian role. Now, Star Wars has confirmed that it's abandoning Pedro Pascal's original Mandalorian character. The Star Wars galaxy is preparing for its theatrical comeback after a 6-year hiatus, with The Mandalorian and Grogu set to premiere on May 22nd, 2026. This marks the franchise's first cinema release since the divisive conclusion of the sequel trilogy in 2019, representing a strategic pivot for Lucasfilm as it transitions from streaming dominance back to the multiplex. For devoted fans of Din Djarin and his pint-sized Force-sensitive companion, the theatrical announcement came as something of a surprise. Following the completion of the show's third season, many expected a natural continuation on Disney+, especially after creator Jon Favreau hinted that work was already underway for additional episodes. The January 2024 reveal that a feature film would replace the anticipated fourth season sparked widespread speculation about the fate of the series. Favreau has now clarified that his plans for continuing the story weren't simply abandoned, they've been preserved. Speaking with Empire magazine, the filmmaker disclosed that he has already completed scripts for what would have been the show's next chapter, and those materials remain in his possession. However, the theatrical version represents a fundamentally different approach to storytelling. Rather than adapting the episodic scripts he'd written, Favreau developed the film around a cinematic structure with broader narrative scope. The streaming season remains conceptually intact, but separate from what audiences will see in theaters. So the streaming season remains conceptually intact, but they're still going to go through with the movie. All right. While Pedro Pascal returns to voice and occasionally embody the armored bounty hunter, the film introduces several notable newcomers to the Star Wars universe. Sigourney Weaver joins as Ward, a colonel commanding the New Republic's Adelphi Rangers, while Jeremy Allen White takes on Road of the Hutt, now a fully grown successor to his infamous father, Jabba the Hutt's criminal operations. I wonder why we're not having Jabba's dad with his flowing locks joining the series. The official synopsis positions the story with the chaotic aftermath of Imperial collapse as scattered warlords threaten the fragile New Republic. Din Djarin and his apprentice Grogu are recruited to help protect what the rebellion fought to establish. Several beloved characters from the streaming series won't be making the jump to theaters. Tamura Morrison has confirmed his absence despite previous crossover appearances, while Gina Carano's legal dispute with Disney during filmmaking effectively rules out in return for Cara Dune. Reports also suggest that Katie Sackhoff's Bo-Katan Kryze and Emily Swallow's Armorer may sit this adventure out, leading to speculation that the film might function more like an extended episode focused primarily on the central duo. A lingering curiosity for many fans involves just how much Pedro Pascal will physically inhabit the Mandalorian armor versus providing voice work from a recording booth. Due to the character's adherence to the Mandalorian creed, audiences rarely see Din Djarin's face, which has allowed stunt performers Brendan Wayne and Lateef Crowder to handle much of the physical performance. Pascal has acknowledged that while he initially spent considerable time in the costume, the demands proved challenging across extended shooting schedules. The production team eventually developed a system that allows for flexibility, with Pascal contributing when feasible, while the stunt team handles the more demanding sequences. Yeah, he's blown up in the film space, doing multiple different, not just individual products, but also cinematic universes. So I can't imagine that he would be in every single scene in all the armor. It just doesn't make sense. Not to mention, he's not exactly the physical powerhouse that stuntmen are, and Din Djarin requires that a lot. So it makes sense that he wouldn't be in the armor. Now it has been confirmed by Jon Favreau that Pascal's original Mandalorian role has been abandoned for this new feature film. Speaking to Empire magazine, Favreau reiterated that fans learned at the end of 2023 Mandalorian Season 3, quote, "One of the last things we say in Season 3 is, like, I don't want to go out there and just be a hired gun. I want to work for the good guys," Favreau said. As the direct notes about this explanation, notably, this goes against everything Lucasfilm promised when The Mandalorian first aired. The show was entirely built around following a mysterious bounty hunter with a muddy past, and The Mandalorian and Grogu is moving away from that completely. Now, instead of giving fans a gritty look at a bounty hunter who is more neutral on the grand scale of right and wrong, The Mandalorian and Grogu will seemingly just showcase another hero fighting for the good guys. When The Mandalorian first aired, it followed the episodic structure of the Case of the Week format, where Din Djarin and the child, later Grogu, would face a new foe or problem each week. There was, of course, an overarching storyline that linked the season together, but for most part, The Mandalorian saw the titular character hired to hunt something down. As the New Republic grew with the addition of more shows like The Book of Boba Fett and Skeleton Crew, The Mandalorian expanded too. The transition to theaters reflects a broader shift on how Disney approaches Star Wars content. Following years of streaming exclusive series on Disney+, Lucasfilm appears focused on revitalizing the franchise's theatrical presence. Sean Levy's Star Wars Starfighter, featuring Ryan Gosling and Amy Adams, is scheduled for 2027, while several other projects remain in various stages of development. This theatrical push comes amid a recalibration of streaming budgets. Rosario Dawson recently revealed that the second season of Ahsoka will operate with reduced funding compared to its predecessor, reportedly cutting over $100 million from the production costs. The cancellation of The Acolyte due to financial concerns further underscores Lucasfilm's shift toward fiscal restraint. Early glimpses from the film suggest a narrative that may separate Din and Grogu for portions of the story, with the bounty hunter potentially partnering with Rhoda the Hutt on a morally complex mission. Footage hints at gladiator arenas and deeper exploration of the criminal underworld, territories the series has only touched upon peripherally. Further afield, Dave Filoni continues to develop what could be an Avengers-level crossover film, uniting characters from The Mandalorian, Ahsoka, The Book of Boba Fett, and other interconnected stories. Until that ambitious project materializes, The Mandalorian and Grogu serves as the bridge between the franchise's streaming success and its theatrical future. All right. So first and foremost, let's talk about the Filoniverse, because this has been something that has been in the works for years now. And all I can say is, meh. I am not excited about anything that Jon Favreau is proposing when it comes to Ahsoka or when it comes to Thrawn. Thrawn already had an amazing story arc in the original Legends EU universe. And that was all redacted by Disney when they bought and put out 2 Thrawn trilogies, which are lesser in scope, in quality than the original one. And ironically, they're written by the same author, Timothy Zahn, who is just great, but he is limited in scope with what he can do based on what Disney allows him to do. And the fact that they're admitting that this is all building up to some sort of universal crossover event, obviously, we're facing the disparate warlords of the Empire uniting under Thrawn and attacking the New Republic. But they've done it in such a way that no one even cares. No one's invested in this new version of Thrawn. No one cares about Ahsoka. Only Filoni cares about Ahsoka. They've changed her character arc so much that at this point, I'm not even interested, and I actually was on her side for all of the early Mandalorian involvement. But that the first season of Ahsoka left horrible tastes in my mouth, and I just don't really give a damn. And the reduced budget actually forced one of the actors out of the second season of Ahsoka because they refused to pay her a livable wage. That's insane. And she was ultimately just one of the Night Sisters, so you throw some paint on someone else and they can fulfill that role, no problem. But the point is that they're reducing budgets by eliminating actors, not by eliminating the ridiculous set designs that don't really pay off on screen. I mean, it's all done in the volume anyway, so where's all the money going? Okay, all that being said, what do you think about the Mandalorian changing his role from being a morally ambiguous character into a good guy? And look, I think you can straddle both fences, to be quite honest. I think, you see a lot of sort of revenge or action films by stars like Bruce Willis and Mel Gibson, whom I'm huge fans of, both of them, and they do morally ambiguous, sort of action films all the time. And sometimes there's even a center of heart to those films, especially Mel Gibson's stuff. He does a lot of really great action films. And if you've never seen his action films, do yourself a favor. But he is clearly a morally ambiguous person. Even stuff like my wife and I have been going on a John Wick kick lately, watching all the films and then the TV series and the documentary and everything. And look, quite frankly, John Wick is a morally ambiguous hero. But he's clearly a good guy because he's focused on love and affection for what first film, his puppy, and dogs later on, but also his wife and the memory of his wife, which is an overarching theme throughout the entire series. That's a good thing. You can't just have good guys that are just purely good and righteous and bad guys who are purely evil and don't care about anyone at all. You have to have this ambiguity because that reflects reality. Look, when you distill things down to good is what you like and evil is what you don't like, it forces you to look at the world through a gray lens rather than a black and white lens, because every individual has their own motivations, and that aligns infinitely more with the world that we live in today. And so I like seeing that complexity, that dimension in characters on screen, whether it's the streaming or whether it's cinematic. It makes for an infinitely more interesting character dynamic. What do you guys think? So Disney wanted to make sure that the headline will read next year, Disney releases the best Star Wars movie in the last 5 years. Right. Based on that last Mandalorian season, you're not terribly upset that it's not coming back, but after The Acolyte and the others, maybe you should be. Well, and here's the thing, is Favreau said that he developed this season into a film with a complete new structure, but he still has the entire series that, for season 4 that he had mapped out. And if that actually evolved differently, if the film evolved differently from the series, well, then you could still have season 4 of The Mandalorian. What I am not interested in is seeing a Mandalorian season 4 that picks up where Mandalorian season 3 left off. Because look, well, now that I'm saying it out loud, I kind of do want to see part. The thing is season 3 of The Mandalorian focused less on The Mandalorian and more on Mandalorians. And I'm not averse to the idea of the Mandalorians going back and taking back their home and fighting the Imperial Remnant warlords to maintain strength and unity and reclaim the mantle of Mandalorians. And the New Republic's going to need the Mandalorians in their fight against Thrawn and the unified Remnant Imperial warlords, which is coming. So I think it could be interesting now that the Mandalorians are united and they go back and they take over their home. You know, we saw that the big dragon reference in the last season. I've got to watch it again because it's been a while. But like, what if we see the Mandalorians flying these massive creatures again? You know, like we saw in the comics in Tales of the Jedi. It would be incredibly awesome. And then we actually have some sort of interested, because if Road to the Hutt goes and reclaims Jabba the Hutt's throne, which Boba Fett is actively taking right now, that frees up Boba Fett to be the badass we saw in Mandalorian Season 2. And if we can have the Boba Fett that we all love back, we can have another Hutt on the throne in Tatooine. Who gives a fuck? Just let them go do their thing. I love that idea. Then we can have Mandalorians, we can have Boba Fett, we can have Din Djarin in the badass view that he's always been, and they're all whipping that Thrawn and Imperial Remnant's ass. Yes, please give me that. So I don't think that's what we're going to be getting in the Mandalorian and Grogu. I think that's going to be the sort of butter. You know, that's going to be like the peanut butter between the pieces of bread of season 3 and season 4 of The Mandalorian, which I'm okay with, as long as it's interesting and it doesn't mess up the entire lore of Star Wars, which arguably Disney has already done ad nauseum. So we'll see. I'm a little bit torn on it because I'm reflecting so fondly on season 1 and 2 of The Mandalorian that I'm just hoping we can get back to basics when it comes to it. You know what I mean? So you still think Jon Favreau's contribution to the setting, you like it, and you like to see his take on the droid rebellion or maybe a Wookiee or Ewok story? Yeah, I think he would actually do really good with, oh, dude, if they just did like a focus on Wookiees, on Kashyyyk, that might be kind of interesting, because the Wookiees were slaves for the Empire in the old EU lore. If you had like the Mandalorians, or maybe it's just Grogu. I'm sorry, not Grogu. Maybe it's just Din Djarin, who goes and takes out one of the Wookiees or something. Or maybe it's the Wookiee from Book of Boba Fett that was a badass. And he goes back to Kashyyyk and liberates them from a potential, you know, maybe it's like an Imperial warlord, Moff, that's sort of controlling the planet or something. Liberates them from that. Then we suddenly have Wookiees on the side of Mandalorians, on the side of the New Republic against the Imperial Remnant. That could be very cool. That's a very cool thought. Too much of the budget goes into special effects. Gone are the days of creativity and practical effects that were a staple of Uncle George. Yeah. Well, and that's why when I see things like statements like we're reducing it by $100,000, that sounds promising, but then you're taking the money out of actors instead of out of special effects. And that means that they're not going in the direction of what made Star Wars so wonderful, of, you know, its practical effects. I'm trying to find that reference to the 100,000, and I totally passed it over. All right. So anyway, are you excited for this change in the Mandalorian's role from being a morally ambiguous, go either way type hero, like anti-hero, into a full-blown good guy fighting for the good guys? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear what you have to say. All right, next up, Shawn Levy teases the music of Star Wars Starfighter. According to Levy, we should look forward to hearing Star Wars Starfighter carve its own musical path with its score. Just before the holiday weekend, Shawn Levy shared some new details about the Star Wars Starfighter, specifically its score. The music of the franchise has been some of the most iconic, largely thanks to the efforts of John Williams. For the new film, composing duties will go to the Thomas Newman, best known for The Shawshank Redemption, Spectre, and Skyfall, and more recently, The Thursday Murder Club. I have seen none of those except for Shawshank Redemption, which, of course, I love because I'm a human. On the episode of Kevin McCarthy's On Film podcast, the director revealed Starfighter would be classically inspired and avoid replicating what Williams has already done. I think that's a mistake. And look, I loved what Rogue One did in reinventing the score. I love what The Mandalorian has done with having its own vibe, its own score. But those familiar Star Wars tones that we are so used to, especially on the big screen, when they're not there, it feels off. And so you don't have to use the entire John Williams score of, all 9 films or anything, but weaving in cues like, and the film is not a good example, but the method is. In the Flash film, the Flashpoint, the latest Flash film, they wove in a bunch of Batman themes from the old Batman. Oh no, actually it was actually Josh Whedon's Justice League that did this, which is a horrible film example. But they wove in the Batman themes from Tim Burton's Batman and the DCEU Batman films, or the Justice League with Batman in them, which actually ended up, in my opinion, being a really nice effect. And then we saw some of that carry through with the Flash film. I'm not averse to the idea of reusing themes because they connect us with emotional resonant moments in previous iterations, which then tell us how to feel about a given moment in the current film. That's a good thing. And when you don't ever use those, especially Star Wars, in a Star Wars film, I think Obi-Wan was another one, it becomes awkward and you feel disconnected. And you're not sure how to feel because it's a Star Wars property, but it's not actually using Star Wars music. So it's not quite Star Wars and it's almost something else. And it's just a little strange, In any case, quote, it may be inspired by some of that, he acknowledged. Okay, that's good. But I knew that I needed a big-hearted movie score from a composer who, like John, doesn't shy away from themes. As far as getting Newman aboard, Levy said he simply called the conductor up. I said, hey, it's Sean. Would you ever consider? And he said, send me the script and describe your vision. And I did both of those things, and it was yes. And I was stoked. If you guys ask me to name my favorite scores, 5 of the top 10 are Tom Newman. The guy's a maestro, Levy continued. What he wants the score of Star Wars Starfighter is myriad musical signatures that help tell the narrative alongside and in addition to the words and images. That's the most generic thing you could say about any musical score. Promising words and an exciting prospect for those in Star Wars music. Hopefully, we get to hear what Newman's cooked up at Star Wars Celebration at some point before Star Wars Starfighter itself hits theaters on May 28th, 2027. And another little note about Starfighter, they actually did a whole third act reshoot. So apparently they have screened the film and it did not screen well. And Lucasfilm demanded that they reshoot the third act of the film in a completely different story. So yes, Sean Levy and they did this with Solo. They did this with Rogue One, which actually ended up being really well. And so I'm hoping it's a better ending, but it's not the filmmaker's original vision. It's now Lucasfilm demanding a new version. And here's the question. Is this new third act for Starfighter in order to connect it to other IP and properties or other upcoming films? It seems logical that, yes, that is the sole reason of having a new reshoot, so that it does easily connect into a wider universe that Lucasfilm is supposed to be creating on the big screen with other properties in Star Wars. But who knows? Who knows? Are you worried about reshoots? Are you looking forward to Newman's non-Star Wars Star Wars film score? And do you like not having John Williams in Star Wars films and series? Let me know in the comments. All right. How do you feel about this scroll at the beginning of a new Star Wars movie? You prefer they keep it yourself? I think they need to have it because it sets up the timeline, because Star Wars spans literally hundreds of thousands of years. So you have to tell us when in that timeline this film is taking place, so we know in universe, oh, this is going on, this is going on, this is going on. If you don't tell us that, We just have to like cross fingers and hope we understand what the hell is going on. And that's not good enough, especially for a massive time spanning galaxy like Star Wars, you know? There are other IP that I pay attention to, like Dragonlance, that have massive time spans. And if you don't tell us when a story is in that time span, then one, it's probably not resonant with world events, which kind of sucks, especially in a saga that spans so much time. But then secondly, it means that we're invested with other things going on at the same time. You hate to sound ignorant, but you're familiar with Williams and Elfman. You hadn't heard of Newman. Yeah, I mean, look, the reality is like I said before, I'd only ever seen the film Shawshank. And so I've never thought of Shawshank Redemption in the terms of its score before. I've only thought of it in terms of the story, which was just so brilliant. So I don't know. I mean, the music had to back up that story, and the songs that were played during the film, especially early on where it's all just 1930s and 40s music. That's my era, you know, from the 20s to 40s is my emotionally resonant era of music. I just love it so much. And men's style as well, and women's style for that matter. But outside of that, I can't think of any musical notes or themes from that soundtrack. So it'll be interesting to see what comes of this. And look, he's talented as a conductor. Of course he can do it. And, you know, I'm not saying it's going to be bad or anything. I just want to make sure it feels Star Wars is all, you know? I mean, there's nothing worse than going to a Star Wars film and then watching something that's more akin to, I don't know, Space Wars instead of Star Wars, you know? We want Star Wars. That's why this IP exists. All right, so let me know what you think in that. Next story, Kathleen Kennedy finally figures out how to stop ruining Star Wars. Yeah, I don't know about that. Let's see what the article says. The biggest villain in Star Wars isn't Darth Vader or Kylo Ren. Nope. If you ask most fans disappointed by the Disney era of the franchise, they'll say the biggest foe of this galaxy far, far away is Kathleen Kennedy. She's the president of Lucasfilm, and she oversaw debacles like the sequel trilogy, the cancellation of exciting films like Rogue Squadron, and the firing of creative directors like Phil Lord and Christopher Miller. However, Starfighter director Sean Levy has revealed that Kennedy finally learned how to make a good Star Wars movie by encouraging him to make whatever kind of film he wants rather than worrying about how it'll affect the franchise's tangled mythology. Really? Well, then how does that line up with the refilmed and restructuring of the story in the third act? Forget the sequels and prequels. In a recent interview with Vanity Fair, Levy revealed that he was one of many directors who expressed interest in making a Star Wars movie way back in 2012. A decade later, Kennedy called and asked him to make a film in the franchise, causing the director to ask questions like, what's it a prequel to and what's it a sequel to? The Lucasfilm president responded, whatever one you want, encouraging Levy to simply make it feel like movies feel. Critically, this may just be a bit of good old-fashioned PR, but the director of the upcoming Star Wars movie publicly praised the executive who gave him the opportunity. However, rebellions are built on hope, and I can't help but hope that Sean Levy is being completely truthful about his exchange with the Lucasfilm president. If it is true, it means that the impossible has happened, and Kennedy has learned that the secret to making a good Star Wars movie is to let directors unleash their inner creativity instead of trying to micromanage the film via committee. And we've just learned that that's not the case because they are reshooting the third act. Star Wars goes down Disney's dark path. While Kennedy oversaw many problems with the Star Wars sequel trilogy and will definitely be circling back to those remarkably uneven films, I think the primary problem with the Disney era of Star Wars films can be traced back to Solo: A Star Wars Story. Originally, the film was being directed by Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, a director duo famous for their hilariously weird sense of humor. But when they tried to make Solo too funny, Disney gave them the boot and brought in Ron Howard as director to make the safest possible version of Han Solo origin story. To me, this was direct evidence of something that would become a major problem with Star Wars under Kathleen Kennedy's supervision. The creative vision of directors would get consistently sidelined in favor of creating a bland kind of house style for this famous sci-fi franchise. Simply put, they didn't want a Star Wars comedy. They wanted a safe action-adventure movie that didn't take any risks. Howard went on to deliver a perfectly serviceable film, of course. More notably, Lord and Miller went on to write and produce the Spider-Verse movies for Sony, and those are considered some of the best animated films and superhero films ever made. For Kathleen Kennedy, there was no try. While many fans hated The Last Jedi for various reasons, Kennedy arguably did something similar when she brought J.J. Abrams back for The Rise of Skywalker, where he promptly undid almost everything Johnson tried to set up. Johnson took, for better or for worse, one creative risk after another, whereas Abrams previously made sure The Force Awakens was nothing more than a soft reboot of the first Star Wars movie. Unsurprisingly, he transformed the Rise of Skywalker into a soft reboot of Return of the Jedi, complete with a Jedi confronting Emperor Palpatine while Lando Calrissian and the Millennium Falcon led a fleet that took out an evil empire's last super weapons. The creative failures of The Rise of Skywalker are even worse when you consider that Disney fired original director Colin Trevorrow, who had a very different version of the movie. He had a tale in which Rey learned to embrace both the light side and the dark side. Rose crashed the First Order flagship into Coruscant, and Finn led a stormtrooper revolution. The leaked script of Trevorrow's movie, Duel of the Fates, sounds infinitely better than what we got from J.J. Abrams, and the main reason is that Trevorrow had his own unique vision for Star Wars, while Abrams was a company man who played things so safe that we hadn't had a new movie in this franchise since 2019. Somehow, Star Wars returned. Now, Sean Levy has said that Kathleen Kennedy didn't lay any expectations on him for Starfighter, instead trusting him to bring his own vision to life and give the film his signature style. On paper, this seems very different from the Kennedy who fired Lord and Miller, who brought Abrams back for Rise of Skywalker. Hopefully, she has learned that fans just want a good movie instead of one that has all its personality and creativity shaved off in the name of safe, unoffensive movies that get shoehorned in the franchise's increasingly garbled mythology. Out of context, what the hell is this advertisement? What am I even looking at? Very strange. Hopefully, Starfighter ends up being as crowd-pleasing as Levy's Deadpool and Wolverine. By all accounts, that was a movie where the director and actors had the creative fun to make the exact kind of movie they wanted to see on the big screen. If Kathleen Kennedy is finally adopting this Marvel mindset for Disney's other major franchise, we might all be paraphrasing Poe Dameron in the next few years. Somehow, Star Wars returned. And unfortunately, we know that this is not the case because of the forced third act rewrite and reshooting of Starfighter recently, which is wildly unfortunate. So, do you think that this rewrite... Because look, Rogue One went through the same thing, and it was brilliant. The whole story was restructured. Han Solo, whether you like Solo or not, it was a perfectly serviceable film, and I enjoyed it a lot. It had some issues, but it was a great film. Could it have been infinitely better with Lord Miller? Maybe. Maybe not. But all I know is I still enjoyed the film. So will I enjoy Star Wars Starfighter with reshoots? Yeah, probably. It's probably still going to be a perfectly serviceable film. I don't expect it being anything greater than Solo, to be quite honest, which for a lot of people isn't saying a lot. But again, I enjoyed Solo. So if it's as good as that, then I'm here for it. And if not, then what are you going to do? It's another Star Wars film that shit the bed, thanks to Kathleen Kennedy. What do you guys think? So the ad is for male enhancement underwear. That's what it looked like. All right, let's close this bad boy out looking at some Star Wars news. And it doesn't look like there's anything new at all from the last time we looked. Everything looks exactly the same, which is shocking. Huh. Did we ever look at the holiday gift guide? Yes, we did. So I don't know. I guess there's nothing else to talk about for Star Wars because we've talked about it all. All right. Well, what are you going to do? So let me know in the comments below about The Mandalorian's original role and its change, about Star Wars Starfighter's music, and about the third act rewrite, whether or not Kathleen Kennedy is going to kill this film just like she did previous ones. I'm interested to hear what you have to say, but that is it for all the Star Wars news on my desk. Thank you for tuning in to this HoloNet News broadcast. If you enjoy it, be sure to like, comment below with your thoughts, and subscribe so you'll catch the next episode where we'll explore more Star Wars news. You can always support this YouTube channel by becoming a member or a Patreon patron. Links are in the description below. Thank you to creator patron Aaron Hardy and developer patron Chris Androu. Thank you for watching, and until next time, my fellow scruffy looking Nerf herders, may the Force be with you.